What if I told you that after Jesus' death, the world didn't just grieve, it witnessed events so extraordinary they seemed to defy explanation? Some call them miracles, others mysteries, but everyone agrees these moments changed history forever. Today, we're diving into 7 astonishing events that unfolded after the crucifixion. Events so profound they left both believers and skeptics in awe. From an eerie darkness covering the earth to graves opening and the dead walking among the living, these stories are not only fascinating, but also deeply symbolic. But before we explore these extraordinary occurrences, let's set the scene. Imagine yourself in 1st century Judea, a land under Roman rule, where faith and oppression clashed daily. The people longed for a Messiah, but no one could have anticipated what happened next. Jesus' execution wasn't just another death sentence. It triggered a series of events so shocking that even secular historians took notice. These weren't random incidents. They were like ripples in a pond, challenging beliefs, reshaping society, and leaving an unforgettable mark on human history. Let's rewind for a moment. The crucifixion itself was brutal. Jesus, a man who claimed to be the Son of God, was sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate. He was flogged, mocked, and nailed to a cross alongside 2 criminals. His followers watched in despair, their hopes shattered. But what happened next defied all logic, leaving witnesses struggling to comprehend the events unfolding before them. By the end of this journey, you might start questioning everything you thought you knew about what happened after Jesus took his last breath. Did these events truly occur? If so, what do they mean for us today? And why have billions of people throughout history believed in their significance? To truly grasp the impact of these events, we need to explore them in depth. Each one carries profound meaning, not just for those who lived through them, but for humanity as a whole. So let's begin. Event number 1, the darkness that covered the earth. Imagine this. For 3 hours, an unsettling darkness blanketed the land. Was it a supernatural occurrence, or was there a scientific explanation? This wasn't just speculation. Multiple ancient texts describe this event. The Bible, in Matthew 27:45, states that from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness fell across the land. But it wasn't just biblical accounts that recorded this phenomenon. Roman historian Thallus, writing in the 1st century, also noted unusual celestial disturbances during this time. Some modern scholars propose natural explanations, such as a solar eclipse or volcanic activity. However, there's a problem with these theories. A solar eclipse isn't possible during Passover because it takes place during a full moon, and no known volcanic eruption could have caused such widespread darkness. Now picture yourself in Jerusalem on that day. The sky suddenly darkens, the air feels heavy, and an eerie stillness settles over everything. Would you see it as divine judgment? A sign from God? Or something even more mysterious? This darkness wasn't just a lack of sunlight, it carried a deep spiritual significance, and it was only the beginning. A moment that echoed through the ages. It was the moment when God turned his face away, as Jesus bore the sins of humanity. But to fully grasp the depth of this event, we need to understand the historical and cultural context. In ancient times, celestial events like solar eclipses, comets, and unusual sky phenomena were often seen as omens or messages from the divine. So when an unexplained darkness covered the earth during Jesus' crucifixion, it wasn't just seen as a strange weather event. It was viewed as a cosmic sign of unimaginable significance. Even non-Christian historians from that era, such as Thallus and Phlegon, recorded that something extraordinary happened that day. Now imagine yourself as a Roman soldier standing at the foot of the cross, tasked with overseeing Jesus' execution. Suddenly, the sky darkens, and an eerie stillness fills the air. Your heart races. Could this be a sign of divine judgment for killing an innocent man? Or is it something far beyond human understanding? This darkness wasn't just a physical event, it was a spiritual declaration that shook the world. Event number 2, the tearing of the temple veil. But the darkness was only the beginning. Something even more shocking happened next. In the heart of Jerusalem stood the Jewish temple, where a massive, sacred veil separated the Holy of Holies, the place where God's presence dwelled, from the rest of the temple. Only the high priest could enter this space, and only once a year, after intense purification rituals. Yet at the very moment Jesus breathed his last breath, this massive veil, 60 feet tall and woven with gold thread, was torn from top to bottom. Imagine standing inside the temple, performing your daily rituals, when suddenly, with a deafening sound, the sacred curtain rips apart as if by an invisible hand. This wasn't just fabric tearing, it was a divine message to the world. The barrier between God and humanity had been removed. Access to God was no longer limited to priests or religious rituals. It was now open to all people, through Jesus' sacrifice. For centuries, the veil represented the separation between sinful humanity and a holy God. But in that moment, that separation was forever destroyed. The old covenant had ended, and a new relationship between humanity and the divine had begun. Scholars and theologians still debate whether this event was literal or symbolic, but its meaning is undeniable. Imagine the shock and awe of the priests who witnessed it. Was it fear? Was it confusion? Or was it the realization that the world had just changed forever? The veil was torn, a symbol of a new beginning. The tearing of the temple veil wasn't just a physical act, it was a powerful spiritual message. This massive curtain, which separated humanity from the presence of God, represented the barrier between sinful man and a holy God. But when Jesus died, that barrier was removed forever. No longer would people need priests or religious rituals to approach God. The way was now open for everyone. However, to fully grasp the weight of this moment, we need to step into the world of first-century Jerusalem. The temple was the very heart of Jewish life, and the veil was its most sacred feature. Its sudden destruction would have been shocking, almost blasphemous to some. And yet, this act carried a deeper message. Event number 3. The dead rise from their graves. But what happened next was even more unbelievable. Imagine standing in the streets of Jerusalem when suddenly, graves began to crack open. The ground trembled, tombs split apart, and holy men and women who had been dead for years rose from their graves and walked among the living. Sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? Yet according to Matthew 27:52-53, this actually happened. It wasn't just a strange supernatural event, it was a preview of what was to come. Who were these people? The Bible describes them as holy people who had died, but it doesn't give us names or numbers. Were they prophets, righteous leaders, faithful servants of God? We don't know for sure. What we do know is that many witnesses in Jerusalem saw them with their own eyes. Imagine visiting the grave of a loved one only to see them standing before you, fully alive. Would you be filled with joy, fear, or complete disbelief? What was the purpose of this event? This wasn't some random miracle. It was a powerful sign that death itself had been defeated. These resurrected saints were living proof that Jesus' death and resurrection had shattered the grip of the grave. It was as if heaven was giving humanity a glimpse of what was to come, a future where death would no longer have power over those who belong to God. The emotional impact: picture the scene, graves opening, loved ones long buried walking through the streets, people crying out in shock, fear, and awe. It was a moment that blurred the lines between life and death, shaking the very foundations of belief. A preview of resurrection. This event was not about fear, it was about hope. It pointed to the ultimate resurrection that would take place 3 days later, when Jesus himself would rise from the dead, conquering sin and death once and for all. It was a divine message to the world. The grave is not the end. What if death isn't the end? If the dead could rise, what does that mean for the living? Is death truly final, or is there hope beyond the grave? These questions have echoed through history, shaping religious belief and philosophical thought for centuries. But the events that followed Jesus' death didn't stop with the dead rising. Event number 4. The earthquake that shook the world. Not only did the dead rise, but even nature itself seemed to respond to what happened on the cross. In Matthew 27:51, we read that the earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open, the very moment Jesus breathed his last breath. Was this a coincidence? Or could the earth literally feel the weight of the Son of God dying? A sign of divine judgment. In ancient cultures, earthquakes were often seen as signs of divine intervention or judgment, and this was no ordinary tremor. Eyewitnesses reported rocks splitting apart, graves cracking open, and the ground shaking violently. Imagine standing near Golgotha as the earth beneath your feet began to tremble, the sound of stone shattering echoing through the city. Would you believe this was an act of God? Or something far more terrifying? Is there evidence of this earthquake? Some skeptics dismiss this event as a myth, but interestingly, geologists have discovered evidence of significant seismic activity in the region around 33 AD, which aligns with the time of Jesus' crucifixion. Whether supernatural or natural, this quake left a permanent mark on history and on the hearts of those who experienced it. The emotional impact. Now, imagine you're a Roman soldier tasked with guarding Jesus' tomb. Suddenly, the ground beneath you shakes violently. Tombs are breaking open. Structures are collapsing. Would you stand your ground or run in terror? But the signs didn't end there. Event number 5, Pontius Pilate's nightmare. Could the man who sentenced Jesus to death have been haunted by guilt? While the Bible doesn't go into detail, ancient writings and early Christian legends suggest that Pontius Pilate was tormented by vivid nightmares and visions after the crucifixion. Even before Jesus was sentenced, Pilate's wife warned him to have nothing to do with this innocent man because she had suffered disturbing dreams about him. Matthew 27:19. A man torn between power and conscience. As the Roman governor of Judea, Pilate was known for his harsh rule and brutal methods. Yet when faced with Jesus, he washed his hands in front of the crowd, claiming innocence. But deep down, was he truly innocent? The weight of guilt. Imagine lying awake at night, haunted by the image of the man you condemned, a man who claimed to be the Son of God. Would you feel regret, doubt, fear? History tells us that Pilate eventually fell out of favor with Rome and was removed from power. Some legends even claim he died in despair. A powerful reminder. Pilate's struggle reminds us of a universal truth. Guilt has a way of haunting the human soul. If a man like Pilate wrestled with the consequences of his actions, what does that say about the choices we make and the lives we impact? The world was shaken, and so were the hearts of men. From the earth trembling beneath the cross to the inner turmoil of the man who ordered Jesus' death, these events weren't random. They were signs that something far greater than death was unfolding. Are we defined by our mistakes, or can we find redemption? This question has echoed throughout history, but perhaps the most controversial and world-changing event was yet to come. Event number 6, the empty tomb and the resurrection. How do you explain an empty tomb that was sealed by Rome and guarded by soldiers, yet somehow empty? Early Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene and the other women arrived at Jesus' tomb, only to find the massive stone rolled away and his body gone. Soon after, eyewitnesses began claiming they had seen Jesus alive, walking, talking, eating, and even allowing them to touch his wounds. A mystery that baffles the world to this day. For centuries, skeptics have tried to explain this event away. Some claimed the body was stolen, others suggested it was a mass hallucination, or maybe the disciples simply made it all up. But none of these theories account for the sheer number of witnesses or the explosive spread of Christianity that followed, despite brutal persecution. The resurrection wasn't just a religious claim, it was a historical movement that reshaped the world. Let's examine the evidence. 1 eyewitness testimonies. Multiple independent accounts describe encounters with the risen Jesus. These weren't just from his followers, but even skeptics like Thomas, who refused to believe until he saw and touched Jesus' wounds himself. 2. The transformation of the disciples. Before the resurrection, Jesus' followers were hiding in fear. After seeing the risen Christ, they boldly preached the gospel, even when it cost them their lives. People don't die for something they know is a lie. The rapid spread of Christianity. Within decades, Christianity spread from Jerusalem to Rome, Greece, and beyond, transforming cultures and societies, all while facing torture, imprisonment, and death. If the resurrection was just a myth, why would thousands willingly die for it? The ultimate question: if Jesus truly rose from the dead, what does that mean for humanity? Is there life after death? Can love truly conquer the grave? Event number 7: the Great Commission and the spread of Christianity. Before ascending to heaven, Jesus gave his followers one final mission: